Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Monday. You know what that means? Another Bad Batch episode review. Well, we just got the season finale. What did we think? Well, we're going to talk about that right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, we just got the season finale of the Bad Batch. Finally, this is part 2, episode number 16. As everybody knows, episode 15 and 16 were technically it was like a 2-part season finale to this show.
Right.
So, hey, Jason's with us. Right out the gate. We got some people. Joanne's with us, so it's cool. People are coming in. I knew Jason wasn't going to let a Bad Batch review go because he also knows this is the final season, or I should say the final episode of the season. Thank you. So yeah, we got to talk about that. But just right out the gate, overall, it kind of fell a little flat for me. I don't know about what you were thinking, but there's some definite cool things that I thought were good about this episode, but then there were also just it was basically a really flat, anticlimactic way of ending this whole season, at least to me. What did you think?
I echo your, no pun intended, your sentiments. But yeah, I thought it fell short. It's not what I was expecting as a season finale. I think that it was a good episode. Don't get me wrong. It was a good episode. It just wasn't a great season finale. I just say it like that.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly how I feel about it too. It was a good episode. But as a season finale though, I thought that the problem that I had is there are two things that a season finale should do. One, it should tie up everything that obviously you saw during the season. Mm-hmm. The second thing that it should do is it should get you super amped up for the next season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think, it sort of did number 1, but I don't think on the second one it didn't really get me hyped up. I've already been hyped up only because of the timing of this thing, the fact that it does take place pretty much at the birth of the Empire. It's featuring this group of clones, and it's talking about how they're making their way through. So I'm already sold, basically, on the next season anyway, just because I want to see more in this time period. But, yeah, this episode wasn't making me go, oh, man, yeah, I can't wait for the next... bring on season 2.
Yeah, definitely. To your first point, I think that did it tie up some stuff? Yeah, we kind of saw the resolution of their predicament and how they got out of there. So to that point, yes. Even to the thing with Crosshair, it's like it still seems like it's wrapped up but not wrapped up. It still doesn't seem completely like defined, if you will. So I feel like, that kind of left much to be desired. And then, of course, the complete ending when they, show Lama Su, going into the whole, I guess, lab or whatever that the Empire had built. It's kind of like, okay, well, what the heck are they doing in there? But, it's just kind of, it didn't leave you like, okay, they didn't give you like a glimpse of what they're working on. Oh, they're talking about this now. Or, you just kind of like, okay, they're walking into a lab.
Right. It's like, for instance, in The Mandalorian, when we had Grogu, they kept your interest. They kept hooking you with each episode. They give you a little bit more of a piece of the puzzle. Jason has a good point. He says, overall, it wasn't that interesting. I highly concur, my friend. The characters ended in the same place as they were after the first episode. All the season accomplished is set up, world building, exposition. That's actually a really good point. And I kind of want to
Yeah.
stick with that point for a few minutes because there's not necessarily anything wrong per se with a season perhaps dedicating its first season. If you're going to take a show of any kind and say, okay, we're going to take the first season and we're just going to do some world building. We're going to do a little bit of exposition, especially in a franchise like Star Wars, because you can firmly really get into things, you can establish things. The problem is they didn't sell this series that way. Now, I will say that overall, and that's another thing I want to actually do, I thought about actually waiting till next Monday to do kind of a season retrospective, and that may still be on the table. We'll see see what we talk about tonight. But, it's one of those things where I think that if they had sold it to be a more world-building exposition thing, and they had done more interesting things within that framework, I think that it would have been a little bit better. The problem is that they sold it as more like an action and adventure thing, and certainly it had plenty of that. And if you take the show episode by episode, I mean, it's not like it's bad. It's just that you want to talk about a totally anticlimactic way. And Jason even points out, also, they did almost nothing with Echo and Tech. He's absolutely right. I mean, actually, they didn't really move a whole lot forward in this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that Jason was absolutely right. There was a lot of world building, and you needed that. You need to understand where we are in this time, in this space, what point of the timeline we're on, what's going on in the galaxy, how is it affecting everybody, the whole shot. So I think that was done perfectly. I think we got some character development, definitely from Hunter. We got some character development from Omega.
Oh, absolutely.
Crosshair. We got some character development from a lot of those guys. So I think that was done really well. Even with the whole Syndulla thing, we got some surprises here in this season where the Syndulla clan, we finally see Hera as a young Hera. So I thought that was cool. We saw Chopper. We had a lot of little different Easter eggs and kind of things going on this particular season that kind of did some callbacks or kind of like, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about right here. So that was really cool. But like you said, Eric, I think when we get to the very end of this, I mean, I will say there was that kind of tense moment where you didn't know what was going to happen when Crosshair was trying to save Omega and R7. It was like, okay, but it was kind of cool to see like all the Bad Batch turn their guns on him, like, don't try it, that type of thing. And for him to actually, so I like that part of it. That was cool. I like the tension building there. And then it was like a nice, cool thing. It's like, all right. It gave me Return of the Jedi vibes. It gave me Darth Vader standing on that bridge after he sends Luke away to go meet with the Emperor, and he's kind of just sitting there kind of reflecting. That's kind of how I felt like Crosshair was. Like,
oh yeah, there's a lot of that. And I just want to point out too that Jason also says, on the other hand, the voice actor did really good and the characters were very consistent.
Yeah,
I wanted to put that up there because
one guy does them all.
Yeah. One guy does the voice for all these people, and they all feel like completely different characters. And that is an astounding achievement on his part. So I really wanted to sneak that in there. But,
he's talking a lot, because he does everybody except Omega. So
pretty much.
Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, Echo, all of them. He's, and for him to kind of come up with these different voices and be able to interact almost like, and be able to change them, and it sounds perfect. Like, like they're not, one doesn't sound like the other one. They're very distinctive. Yeah, very good point, Jason.
Yeah, I'm glad actually that he brought that up, because that was one thing, embarrassingly on my part, that through this whole series, I think we pointed it out a little bit in the first couple of reviews, but really with each passing episode, the depth gets a lot more rooted in, and you really appreciate what he can do. Is just a single voice actor voicing all these different characters, and that is a really good. Yeah, that's a great point. But going to your point though, Daryl, when you talk about the Return of the Jedi vibes, I do. Yeah, I do sense a lot of that. There's a lot of reflection in this episode. I mean, one of the things that it's a complaint that I have, but I understand why they did it, and they did it more because this goes into your point where you do have a lot of reflection. I thought that they spent way too much time trying to escape Kamino. This is something that they could have done in 10 minutes, but on the other hand, though, if they had done that, then they might have had to do something else, because obviously the whole point in this was to give that breathing room for Hunter and Crosshair to be able to have these philosophical discussions, and also to hammer home the whole destruction of the Kamino cloning facility, because it's a big deal. After all, it was a huge staple of the prequel trilogy.
Sure. I think I would have liked, I think there was a missed opportunity where you have them all either in that one big medical area, like after they escaped that big fish thing or whatever the heck that was, but either there, or it was that part when, Crosshair is basically like, oh, she's calling the shots now.
Which,
Like,
I mean, I have to
thought
say,
that was hilarious.
I mean, there was a lot of, one thing that this show does really well is organic humor. And by that, I mean humor that feels very natural in the scene. It's not jokes that are written to provide comic relief. I mean, it's humor. And this is something that George Lucas was a master of throughout the original trilogy, along with, of course, the people that directed and, Lawrence Kasdan and all that. I mean, obviously there were more people involved, but overall, Lucas is the one that's spearheading this thing, so I'm giving him the props. But it was creating very natural, circumstantial humor that became known as Star Wars humor. That's the type of humor that we know of. And that's what's really cool, I think, about The Bad Batch, is in some ways even better than just about any other series. I guess The Mandalorian kind of does it too. I mean, they all really do it, but I just think that The Bad Batch really excels at giving us that organic Star Wars style humor and having it be really legitimately funny.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that whole moment, but the moment where I feel like they missed was, I think you could have added a lot more drama to the whole situation of like the argument. Like, I really would have loved to have seen like all of them kind of get up in arms and kind of in each other's faces about what really happened. And I think that would have kind of created like such a thing where the reflective pieces would have now had way more weight to them. I do like the fact that Omega goes over to try to talk to Crosshair. He's just like, "Ugh, go away," like this, like he's so annoyed by this little kid. It's just hilarious.
Well,
And
I
it's
think
like, yes,
he's almost like, and it makes me wonder sometimes that the writers didn't say, "Hey, there's a certain section of the audience probably that feels that way, so let's write that into Crosshair's character," right?
exactly,
To kind of speak for the segment of the audience that maybe isn't a huge Omega fan.
right. But one thing that I did enjoy though, and Tech, right? Tech made that statement about Crosshair, and Crosshair was basically like, well, why are you on my side? He's like, well, I'm not on the side of whether you're right or wrong. He's like, I'm just stating facts. Like, maybe you're this way. That's just who you are. Like, you can't help being this way. And I really thought that was really kind of poignant because, Tech generally doesn't get involved in more of the emotional conversations, so to speak. But to see Tech actually kind of like jump in there and kind of actually talk about it, still from his platform though of being technical and being more about facts and numbers and things like that, like that's his strong suit, but he applied it to the emotions, And I really enjoyed that part. I think that was really cool to see Tech really kind of like step up and not necessarily. He's like, I'm not really defending you. I'm just really just explaining the situation. Like, look, I mean, you are who you are. You can't help that, just like any of the rest of us can't, And so maybe this is just what's best, And I just thought that was just kind of like, wow, like they're just kind of everybody's kind of coming to terms with the situation because everybody has this whole thing of, well, you left me, no, well, we had to because otherwise this blah 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 blah. But we wanted to come back we were trying to come back for you, and they had this whole clash. I just really wish they would have went a little bit deeper, especially about that inhibitor chip. I think that's the one thing I really wanted to know because we kept saying like, when did his inhibitor chip get removed? Because I felt like that was something that should have really been explained in this episode.
Yeah, you mean more, I mean, granted, it's true. The fans have had to more or less figure it out based on context clues when it was done. And that honestly didn't so much, that still doesn't really necessarily bother me as much as it bothers you, I think. Simply because I'm okay with just going, hey, he removed the chip, fine. Because really it's more about the effects of it than the mechanics of it. But where I think that your point does come into play, though, and this is why I don't just say, well, I don't, care or whatever, is because in a way, I think when he does it, could actually lend more context to his behavior and everything else. Because it's kind of like we had talked about before. Most of his motivation, and he reiterated this even during this episode too, where, a good soldier follows orders. And he's always been kind of wired that way anyway. And I'm not necessarily sure. Oh, by the way, Jason has to he has to go so he said, "See you in the replay. May the force be with you." Yeah, man, Jason, don't forget to.
Jason.
I'm gonna get to some of the comments that you already made in the show, so you'll see that pop up. But as usual, you know where the comment section is. And hey, anybody else that might be watching the replay too, join Jason and leave your comments in the comment section and smash that like button. We like the like button. And don't forget to subscribe too. But yeah, I just think that he was already somewhat on that track. And that's why I think that when Omega toward the end says, I used to think that it was the inhibitor chip causing you to act this way, but now I realize it's just you. And then she walks away all, disappointed or whatever. I think that that's part of them trying to tell us, in a way, it almost really doesn't matter when he removed the chip, because obviously the chip really isn't motivating him that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably more so enhance what he already believed, basically.
Yeah, right. Like more like an amplifier than an inhibitor per se.
Exactly. Because, I mean, and when you hear that, and it took me like a second time watching it to kind of really understand what I believe they were trying to say. And that's and we talked about this, about, why like we know why they chose Jango Fett as the source material pretty much of creating all the clones. But then they also put, genetic material to make them more so obedient or subservient in that way. Well, because these are defective clones, most of them have that kind of like, well, yeah, this isn't right. They kind of have a sense of morality in a way. Whereas Crosshair, maybe in his genetic makeup, he has more of that obedient servant type vibe. So it's like, it's not even like they said, like it's not the chip, it's really him. Like it's really this is who he is, because like they all, because they were all genetically modified, and so because they were modified, you're messing with the design. And so when you mess with the design, sometimes you get what you get. And so
basically what you're saying is that all clones are basically taught to be obedient, and they're kind of programmed that way. Well, what you're saying
Right.
is the defectiveness was more like that part of his programming is almost like on steroids now, and it's just like super obedient and
No, not super obedient, but I'm just saying it's more so like because when they were because he had his they had their own special lab where they were created,
mhm.
Omega and the rest of them. So he purposely intentionally enhanced their abilities, Crosshair's accuracy, Hunter's ability to be like Wolverine basically from the X-Men, and Tech's intelligence and all that. All those things are super enhanced, but in the process of that, it may have either weakened some of their morality, and in his never changed
Mm.
because they're all the clones had that whole thing like, okay, well, yes sir, like eventually it gets like they might question something, but then they'll always just turn around and be like, okay, yes sir, no problem, and they will just do it because that's how all the regs were. Well,
Well, in a way, though, because one of the things that I find really super fascinating about these guys is that they're more that way toward each other, but not necessarily. One of their biggest problems when they were first introduced was that they weren't listening to their superior officers. But when it comes to
well that's
Hunter, though, they'll listen to him. They respect his authority.
well that's because he was kind of bred as the leader, though he was kind
Right.
of put in that position, and they just kind of like, and they're because they, and you got to think about it, they were all together, so the segregation that they had to deal with, like, okay, Clone Force 99, these guys aren't like us, so they're way over here, and then the rest of everybody else is kind of together. So they had to kind of form that bond in a family amongst themselves because that's all they had, and they all came from the same pod pretty much.
Hmm.
But that's why I thought it was really cool to see that's why Omega was so attached to him from season one. Like when they brought Clone Force 99, she was like so enamored with them. That explains why, because she's related. I mean, she's basically in the same pod as them. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, with them looking at Crosshair, I think they're starting to realize that this is kind of like, well, he's just genetically predisposed to follow orders of the regime that's in control. That's his programming. But we don't have that. And, we kind of have more of a lax version of it. And now that our inhibitor chips are removed, we're really good now.
Well, it's more, and it's also critical thinking, too. It seems that they're a little bit better at assessing the actual situation and making that decision. Whereas, like you
Hmm.
said, Crosshair is more like, okay, well, these guys are in charge now, so now I'm going to obey them.
Hmm.
It's almost like whoever. Oh, and Ronaldo and Dwight have joined us.
Hey, what's going on, fellas?
Hey guys. So to that end, actually, let me get to some of these. I'm going to get to some of the last couple that Jason sent in before he had to leave. He says escaping Kamino for so long wasn't a problem for me. For one, it was believable that it takes so long, but also there's a lot of tension between Crosshair and the others, which keeps things interesting. And to clarify, I don't disagree at all.
Hmm.
But my problem is context once again. Because, look, they've escaped things that were way harder than this in a lot less time. Screen
Hmm.
time, I'm talking about. I'm not necessarily talking
Right.
about real time in the universe. But you
Hmm.
have a 30-minute episode.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like my criticism was they didn't have to spend all this time on Kamino, escaping Kamino. They could have moved on to something else and got to some meatier things. You still could have had all the same tension. They could have had this on the ship when they were going to the next destination. What I'm saying is they could have advanced some of the storyline a little bit more rather than let's have this whole exciting season finale on Kamino. Because the other thing you could have done, and I probably should have brought this up earlier, is you could have taken episode 15 and 16 and just made that episode 15. You could have cut a lot of the, excess out and just made that a really lean episode 15 and then had a more exciting season finale for the season finale. But I mean, you know, it works. I'm not saying it doesn't. It just made for kind of a lackluster finale.
Well, I agree with you with the first part. I mean, well, not the first part, like more so the second part of. Yeah, I think they could have made this more of a lean 15 almost. I agree with you on that. But seeing as that they didn't, I think that them getting out of Kamino was the trap of getting out of Kamino was cool because unlike all these other places, like everything is like blowing up around them. And see, while they've always kind of had like, okay, we can rappel down, we could jump off and jump into a ship. Like you're surrounded by water. and it's like miles and miles of water.
Right. Don't get me wrong.
So,
I mean, I get it. I get all that because, and honestly, normally I would probably be applauding this move because sometimes I'm critical by how quick they get out of certain situations.
Right.
Normally I would applaud this move. The reason why I'm not applauding the move is because it's a season finale. I don't need to see an entire season finale of them escaping an underwater planet, basically. Well, it is now. The city is basically submerged, right? I mean, they spent probably a good 90% of the episode doing this. And that was really more the issue that I had. If this had been more part of episode 15 and you just cut out, you take what was in 15, you take what was in 16, and you basically trim a lot of the excess fat and just made a really lean 30-minute episode, I think that you'd be good. Of course, I just put up that Jason had said that the humor was good, understanding the characters. Dwight basically says Clone Force 99 only fights for each other, which of course explains their obedience to each other. Then Ronaldo jumps into the fray. He says, from that point of view, I agree. I think they spent too much time in Kamino. Being someone who is claustrophobic and has a great fear of the sea, this episode made me feel terrified. Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, this kind of gave me, because this episode kind of gave me Deep Blue Sea vibes. Like, once again,
it was totally Deep Blue Sea vibes.
And so like,
absolutely.
Or Meg, for that matter. Like it kind of gave me that whole type of thing, where you had this creature that's looming out there. The only thing that really, I can say that really irritated me about this episode, just thinking about it irritates me, is the whole stupid Omega going after R7 thing. Like, dude, it's not that important. Like, really? Like, you're...
Well, okay. No, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the point. However, if you really take it in context, remember, context is everything. If you take it in context of her character, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, she's a kid. That's kind of was always like her
she's
friend.
Just always, and that's the thing, man. I mean, she wants to save everybody, and I mean,
but you just never know. I guess the thing about Omega, I will say about her character, and this is totally realistic in my opinion, because even in for those of you who may have children or watch children or have nieces or nephews or something that are always around, even for me, like I have a cousin and she's 6. Now she's really advanced for a 6-year-old. Like she really stuns you and surprises you at some of the things that she knows and does as a 6-year-old. It's mind-boggling sometimes. Like, wow. But then, like, you never know when she's going to hit that switch and become a complete kid again and just do something, because you almost kind of get used to them being more like adult-like, and then all of a sudden they do something that's like a kid. And you're like, well, what did you do that stupid thing for? But then you have to remember, oh, yeah, they're a kid. And I think that's one of those things about Omega, is because I thought we kind of passed that a little bit. because it seemed like she had grown out past that whole kid like thing, and she was kind of really maturing. But then like you get to this point, and it's just like, ugh, you're
Well,
a
but
kid again.
you have to go through a repeatable thing, though, right? So she learns a lesson, and it contributes to her growth. But the problem is that even though she learns it for that one circumstance, sometimes, like every kid, they have to learn through multiple circumstances to see that this same action is going to cause this same outcome. And I think that that's where Omega's at sometimes, is that given a different situation, she doesn't always equate something that she had learned before. She just thinks, okay, this is the right thing to do in this circumstance. And I think as time goes on, she's going to learn, oh, okay, yeah. Because remember, it would probably be almost too unrealistic if she grew up too quickly, or she learned too fast, or she was too good. Then you would get the whole Mary Sue thing going too. Oh, she's too smart, she's too powerful, or whatever.
Now it's Ray all over again, right?
Yeah, and you don't want to do that because there is a danger they could turn Omega into that, depending on how they handle the character, primarily in season 2. So I think that they're doing, even though it can be irritating sometimes, because again, this goes back to the criticism of why even put a kid in this stupid thing? Why can't we just have one Star Wars thing
With adults.
which, I mean, obviously, I was going to say the Mandalorian kind of is, even though you have Grogu, but it's a different kind of thing. Well, let's get back to some of these chats. There's a lot of them. So Dwight basically says the tension was reduced because the audience knew there is a season 2. Everyone will make it.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean,
not necessarily everyone, but I mean, you can have stuff where like somebody could have died. I mean, you could have had that. It just depends on who though, like who's expendable enough. I mean, honestly, I think you could have probably got rid of like if Echo would have died. I don't think everybody would have. It'd have been sad, but I don't think everybody would have been so hung up over that.
Why?
Echo
Because he wasn't one of the originals, but he was kind of original in the actual. He's the bridge from the Clone Wars series.
No, but I'm just saying, like,
I know he's not officially part of the team.
Well, no, he is.
Now.
I mean, he is now. But what I'm saying is, I think Echo's character just doesn't offer as much to the group. I mean, his skill set offers a lot. But what I'm saying is, they were doing that before he got there. Is what I'm saying. So
yeah.
if he would have died, it's not like they would have not stopped fixing the ship. Tech was still fixing the ship. It's just now they got an extra person to kind of help override stuff, and he's kind of like a Tech 2.0 in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you'd have lost Echo, you still have the core. Now, see, if you lose Tech, that's a major blow.
No, I mean, I see what you're saying. And then, of course, Ronaldo says, overall, I like the episode. I don't think it's perfect. In a way, it felt like part 1 of a bigger story. And I think that that's really kind of what my whole problem with it is, in a way. Dwight says, I thought the season more or less was showing the switch from the Republic to the Empire and the end of Kamino.
Yep.
That's very true. That was one of the things that we continue to like about this thing. And then he goes on to say, I like the episode as well. If you watch 15 and 16 back-to-back, then to me it was a nice ending. That's exactly, I think what we're saying is that it would have just been nice if they just made that one episode and then, because 15 and 16 are obviously connected together and they do make a really good episode.
Let me ask this question. Dwight, do you think this was, so you say it was a good ending, but do you think it was a good season finale?
Right. See, it was a good ending for the episode.
Right.
But our criticism is just not a good, because both of us agree that this totally falls flat as a season finale. Especially when you take into consideration that some of the middle episodes of the season were way more exciting and advanced the story. Because again, just to go back, because I don't think you guys were here when I said this initially, there's 2 things that a season finale needs to do. One, it needs to tie up the season. that whole story arc of whatever's going on during that particular season. And then the second job is to set up and get us excited for another season.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really do that. Ronaldo says, I suppose a droid can be activated, but I think the scene would have been more powerful if he had sacrificed himself.
I agree.
Totally agree. This is one of the reasons why I think everybody loves Rogue One so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had K2SO sacrifice himself in a very grandiose, heart-wrenching way. I mean, it's still, every time I see that, man, it still gets to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, he definitely went down fighting. But the cool thing about Rogue One is that nobody survived.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that was the thing that just surprised me, honestly, out of the whole thing was nobody survived. Like, I'm thinking, like, okay, somebody like Jen or, somebody was going to make it off, or even Cassian was going to make it off. Nope.
That's true.
Like, nobody.
Well,
and that's what made Rogue One so cool, because it was truly war. It was like, but you saw what the greater good was still accomplished, but it kind of gave you like that whole many Bothans died to bring us this information.
And I think that's why they did it.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't the Bothans really stealing it that time, but they've stole it more for the second Death Star. But the thing about it though is that they could have, and actually it's funny because I was reading some stuff where they had toyed with the idea of having one or two of them survive. But then they came to the same conclusion, which I applauded, by the way, that we all did. Well, where are they during the original trilogy then? Because, see, the problem with the characters of Rogue One
is that they're so close.
Well, it's not just, well, that's true, too. It's kind of like, a couple of days before or something, or a week or whatever. But it's not even just that. Every one of them was really kind of vital. So there's no way that they would be sent out somewhere else. For instance, if any of those characters survived, they would have been on the Death Star attack run. No question about it.
What's up with Chirrut? I don't think he would have.
Well, hey, man, he would have been up there blind as a bat in his X-Wing. I'm one with the Force is with me. And just
he got a little stick on the outside to try to figure out where he's going.
Exactly. Or instead of an R2 unit, they would have had, what's the other guy's name? Chirrut's partner.
Baze.
Yes, Baze. They would have found a way to jam him in that compartment, give him a little spacesuit or whatever, and he could guide it, Right. Ronaldo says, it would have been nice to add that no one is safe feeling that Rogue One has. And that's exactly right. I think that's...
Yeah.
And see, now you guys are getting to the problems, ultimately, that I had with this. And let me be clear, and I think I'm speaking for Daryl as well. It's not that this was a bad episode. It wasn't. No. It was just a bad season finale. That's the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the important distinction that I think needs to be made, is the fact that the episode was fine. And in fact, it did do a lot of good things. It certainly showed a lot of growth for Omega. It gave us a little bit, even though, again, I think it is a weakness in a way about the whole Crosshair Hunter relationship. I think, like you said, it could have been explored a little bit deeper. Could have been a little bit, just, I don't know, just a little bit better.
More intense, in my opinion.
More intense and more emotional. Joanne says, how would you have made it more climactic? Well... There's a couple things they could have done, really. Obviously, they were working more towards pretty much the end of the episode. So we really haven't talked too much about the end of the episode. I did want to get to this because there's some theories going on where, obviously, once they get out of Kamino and that whole thing hits, they end up taking... Nalase?
Yeah.
Okay. These these names sometimes
Kaminoan
names. Yeah, they're But anyway, they take her to this jungle-like planet where they have this base and they're obviously doing some cloning type stuff, or at least some scientific stuff. Now, the big thing is, in Heir to the Empire, in the Thrawn trilogy, actually. Heir of the Empire, Last Command, but it was primarily in the Heir of the Empire. There was a jungle planet called Wayland. I think it was called Wayland. Like Wayland, Wayfarer. I think it was Wayland. And that was where Palpatine was doing some experimentation, some cloning, stuff like that. There's a big theory out there that perhaps they're going to bring that planet into canon this way. Because one of the big theories surrounding the whole Bad Batch is that they're going to use the Bad Batch to eventually explain how, well, they're going to use it in part to explain Palpatine's return. Obviously, they're going to try to explain a little bit of this in The Mandalorian, stuff like that, but they're going to give you some pieces of the puzzle. So when you take things as a whole, you will then see, oh yeah, okay, you can rewatch The Rise of Skywalker and go, yeah, all right, whatever. This has been happening all along.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's true, if this is that planet, that would just be awesome. That would just be incredible. And I think to answer the question about how to make it more climatic, they could have dealt a little bit more with that aspect of it. I mean, granted, they're not going to want to give too much away because that was sort of the hook. That's the cliffhanger. That's what's supposed to give you a little bit of a, hey, can't wait for season 2 kind of thing. But I agree with you when you said, okay, they set this whole thing up, but they didn't really do anything that got you all that excited about it. You know, you just like, all right, whatever. You know, they didn't give you enough information.
See, I would have, to make it more climatic for me, I would have done 2 things. Either one, I would have had, I almost called him Deadshot. Crosshair. I would have had Crosshair because that's what totally reminds me of.
It's true.
I would have had Crosshair threaten Omega more. Like, I probably would have had like him more enraged and like, you picked this kid over me. You know, like, I hate you, you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of thing. Almost like an Anakin type situation. More so like where he's kind of like, he really resents Omega and maybe draw some tension in that way. But then, of course, he eventually has to save her. You know, I would have done it that way because I think that would have created tension amongst everybody. Because, of course, you know, Omega is a lovable kid and, you know, you want... anytime, of course, children are threatened, you know, it kind of just puts people on pins and needles. But then also I would have done something where, like, at least at the end when they were when they finally made it to the Marauder and they were kind of like, you know, giving each other like their last chance, maybe have like, as they're pulling off, Crosshair, you know, shoots a tracker on, you know, onto the ship. And it's just like, we'll meet again or something like, or, you know, I let you go this time. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least like let us know that he's going to pursue them. Yeah, like let us know that he's going to pursue them.
I mean, for the first one, now see that second part, that would be cool. That would be a little bit more climatic at least. But the first part, I actually think it was cool that they didn't have him blame her or anything like that. Because to me, that would have been the whole cliched thing to do. I actually thought the fact that, other than being annoyed, Crosshair didn't really have any issues with her. His issues were with Hunter and those guys. I thought that was far more realistic, too, given the situation. Because he didn't really put that much importance on her anyway.
Well, yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Because, see, but what I'm saying, he would have known that would have hurt them. That's what I'm saying. Like, hurting Omega would have hurt the Bad Batch. And that's,
well, I know. Ultimately,
that's his revenge.
I agree. But I don't necessarily think that the tension... See, the second... Well, okay. So the second half of that first part that you talked about, I think would have been cool. Where it's kind of like, is he going to shoot her? Is he not? Even though they did have a little bit of that. Yeah. But in order to really have it more so, they would have had to give him a reason to want to shoot her other than just because she's part of that team. Okay, so... We got a bunch of chats in. It's a really chatty group today. This is good. Ronaldo says, something that I really liked was the moment when Omega looked at those little tubes where the clones were, and Wrecker, that would be that's a different kind of clone. Wrecker tells her that they need to continue. And he goes on to say, it was a sad moment. Those clones were only infants. Yeah. I mean, I think that was really poignant and really cool. I would agree. I think that's one of those things that you definitely are trying to put as much emotion into this stuff as you can. And I think that's really where this series succeeds, where some of the other ones fail only because they gloss over it too much. I like the fact that they actually really deal with feelings. They deal with a lot of the things, a lot of the issues that they would be dealing with post-Republic. Because remember, the whole idea is the Republic is turned into the Empire. And people are trying to figure out almost their place in the universe. You know? So I think that's a pretty cool thing.
I like the fact that one of the comedy moments I loved in the whole scene was Record like being annoyed being like stuffed into that capsule because he's so big. And then Tech was like, well, at least you don't have to ride with anybody. I mean, at least give one to yourself. So I just thought that was just kind of hilarious too.
I mean, I've said it a lot. The comedy in this series is probably the best, I think, in some of this stuff. Now, Dwight's got a couple too. He says, can you guys imagine Omega killing Cad Bane?
Oh my God, that would be blasphemy.
Well,
blasphemy.
Okay.
Nope. Nope. Before you even start, nope.
By the way, Dwight also confirmed that it was Waylon. I can only see that happening once Omega gets older and way more experienced. Especially because Cad Bane would also be older. But even then...
No, man. I mean, this guy's taking on
Jedi.
I mean,
elite clones, bounty hunters.
Yeah, man. Like,
I would have to almost say that it really depends on what they do with Omega.
The only way they can make that work, and I know what they would do, is because she's such a master strategist. That would be the way.
Well, I'll give you a good example.
No Mandalorian intended, but
I will give you a really good example. If you had told me during, say, third, fourth season of the Clone Wars, could you imagine Ahsoka taking out Cad Bane? I would have laughed and said no. Now, she'd wipe the floor with him. So, things could change. Omega...
I don't know. I don't think Ahsoka could do it. Because you got to think about it, like, Obi-Wan and Anakin couldn't even do it. Well, Anakin could have. Anakin probably could have done it.
Could have.
But he's not, because of the Jedi way of not being able to kill,
Right. I mean, and Obi-Wan was the same thing. Both those guys could have.
Yeah. But their doctrine wouldn't allow them to.
And I'm talking,
they had the ability, yeah.
And I'm
ability-wise, yes.
Right. And I
agree with you. Okay.
And Ahsoka now? Like now, meaning Mandalorian Ahsoka.
Well, yeah. I mean, especially since she's not part of the Jedi
Order anyway. She's ultra powerful. That too. So she's not really constrained by a lot of the things that would have constrained her. But I mean, she's like really, really powerful. And skilled. Highly skilled.
Oh, yeah.
And she's gone up against like Asajj Ventress. She's gone up against Maul. She's gone up against all these people that,
She went against Vader. I mean, that's all you got to say.
She went against Vader, and she lived. Enough said. Cad Bane would present zero threat to her, in my opinion. Okay, so now Ronaldo says, Luke Skywalker confirmed? I hope so. It's funny. I thought about that, too.
Yeah.
The Luke clone, because...
Yeah.
I think it really depends on how much, and then of course Ronaldo goes on because he was created there. I think, yeah, he was, but I don't think that they're gonna bring that much of the old legends into it.
Yeah.
Of course, Ronaldo says Mega killing Bane would be hilarious, Dwight.
Yeah.
And then. Well, now this is some interesting stuff that Dwight's bringing up. He goes, true for who her character is, but I was more referring to her age. Originally, Boba killed him at the around the same age. But again, I think a lot of it is a skill set thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to take a lot of that stuff into consideration. About the only thing that we could say about Omega that we know for sure is, like you said, she's a master strategist. And I think that they're going to play a lot of that into season 2. At least I hope so.
I hope so too, yeah.
So then Ronaldo brings up an interesting thing. He says, I've heard theories that the ending points to the creation of Snoke. Do you agree? I think it's an exaggeration. Not necessarily, because we were talking about something Friday about that.
Oh, about how Palpatine kind of created.
Yeah, the Snoke was really kind of like, it was more like his kind. It was like Snoke was really a clone of Palpatine, not necessarily just a creation.
Yeah, it was a clone of Palpatine that was defective.
Yeah, right. So, because Ronaldo, I know you didn't chat in on Fridays, but I don't know if you saw it, but you should definitely go back and check it out, because we go really in depth about Snoke, what we know now versus what we knew then, and what we're thinking along those lines now. So it would definitely be worth checking out, and of course liking the video. Joanne says, are you looking forward to the next season?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily think that this was an episode talking about episode 16, the season finale of The Bad Batch. This was not necessarily an episode that got me excited for the second season. But as I pointed out earlier in the show, I was excited for the second season anyway, because I really think that this is a brilliant show. Mm-hmm. And it's covering an area of Star Wars that really doesn't get a whole lot of coverage. And that is, the Republic has fallen, the Empire has risen. So now you have this whole old Republic, not old Republic, but former Republic way of life. And now the entire galaxy has to get used to, well, how do things work under the Empire? And you get a big glimpse of that. That was one of the things that I really loved about The Bad Batch, is that you really get a glimpse of what life under the Empire was like for the average citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really cool. So I'd be looking forward to the next season anyway. My point was just, this episode should have made me even more excited. It should have made me, just as soon as it was over, go, exactly, like, oh, I can't wait till the next episode. And it just didn't do that for me. But that doesn't mean I'm not looking forward to the next season. Dwight says, hey guys, remember Boba was only 13 or 14 at the end of the Clone Wars, and the Boba versus Bane occurrence happened originally during what would have been in season...
Probably 7.
Yeah. And, right. But again, skill level. I can't stress this enough. Boba Fett. Now, granted, I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, look, Boba and Omega are both clones of Jango. They're both unaltered. But Boba was trained. Boba was trained to be kind of what Jango is.
Mm-hmm.
Omega was sheltered and lived on Kamino, and she was basically kind of a scientist. Office. Yeah, like an administrator, exactly. Now, you get the whole strategy thing going, and she's learning to fight thanks to the clones and all that stuff. Again, I think she's going to be formidable. But not yet. Not yet. Not that much, anyway. Ronaldo says, actually, yes, although I think the story should remain as a standalone season, I'm curious what they will do next. And then Dwight follows that up with, this is one of those shows that I was not interested in all. Watched the first episode with my niece and tuned in every week thereafter. That was exactly what you and I had said.
Exactly.
We were actually...
to us both, Dwight.
Yep,
it's fine.
all three of us, because this is one of those times where I remember when we first heard about The Bad Batch, I'm like, really? They're going to make a whole... Why are you going to make the follow-up to the Clone Wars about these guys? Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
First episode in, bam, totally hooked.
Yep.
And going back to Ronaldo's point, I agree that a lot of what happened should be basically a standalone, or at least maybe not too interconnected to the next season, but some of it's going to be. I don't necessarily need to see more of the Crosshair Hunter thing, I don't think, because in my mind, and you can weigh in on this too, actually all of you guys can, but in my mind, they sort of wrap that up. You got two people that have philosophical differences, and each of them are going to go down their own path. Now, it would be interesting to see them cross paths again and maybe have to have that emotional tug of war. In other words, not really want to kill each other, but they oppose each other kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I think that they more or less wrapped up the whole Crosshair Hunter storyline.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you might have, and like I said, I agree with you, Eric. I think they're going to do some of the same things, like their paths might cross. I'm really interested to see how Fennec Shan, if she's going to pop back up again. I want to see if Gab Bane pops up again, because now, like I said, the Empire could want to deal with these guys now. Like, okay,
Sure,
they're
they're out
causing,
there.
they're out there. They're causing too much of a problem. I think we're going to see them link up with Rex, and I think we're going to see this budding of the rebellion even more.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they might get out, and they might be the ones to kind of get out from the hand of Sid and join up with the rebellion under Rex, and kind of like work with Rex and Bail Organa and to kind of like do certain missions to kind of figure out, to get information from the Empire to blow up some stuff that they need, done, and it costs a bunch of grief for them.
Well, hey, it's Star Wars. They got to blow up stuff.
Of course.
Dwight says, in retrospect, it makes perfect sense why Omega knew who they were and was excited when she saw them during the announcement of the new Empire. She was there when they were enhanced.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I really like the way that they started out. So yeah, I knew this was going to turn into a whole season retrospective thing, which is good. But yeah, I think that was one of the things that they did really well too, is they gave you that in little bite-sized chunks. Because at first it almost looked like she was just sort of a fangirl. But then as time goes on, you start to think, oh, well, maybe she just needs to feel a part of something. And then as more time goes on, you're like, oh, wait, she's older than them and she was there when they were created and all this other stuff. So now, as you're peeling away the layers of this onion that is the story,
Mm-hmm.
it basically reveals itself, I think, really well. And I'm hoping that they do more of this type of thing in season 2, really, because there's a lot of layers to this. Ronaldo says, I wonder how much the Hunter and Crosshair story could stretch, because I agree. I don't think there's much to show. Yeah, honestly, I mean, you can put your two...
Sense.
Well, I was going to try to use, Star Wars. Yeah, 2 credits. You can put in your 2 credits if you want, but like I said, I think other than just having them cross at times to where they would have to try to, okay, I
Not
need
kill
to
each other.
accomplish my thing, but I don't really want to kill this guy, and some of the natural tension that would just naturally appear when you have a friend or somebody that you think of as a brother, but they're on the opposing side. They could do more with that down the line. I don't necessarily think it should be a one and done kind of thing, because that wouldn't necessarily be realistic. I just hope they don't really dwell on it and make it like some crazy part of season 2.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's a perfect assessment of that. I think, like I said before, we need to see where the Bad Batch now go from here. I really want to see them kind of link up with Rex again, because I think there's something there that they're kind of been kind of lightly just picking at, and I think we're going to get more of that in season 2.
Okay, so now
And
we're
I wonder,
coming to the
I wonder
part
if they're
of,
going to have more of episodes in season 2. I wonder if they're going to keep it at 16 episodes or they're going to add more.
well, I mean, they could, because if you think about it, I mean, even the massive Clone Wars stuff,
Clone
right?
Wars.
Which is basically like the old stuff. I mean, even normal TV shows don't do this anymore, where they go 22, 24 episodes a season. 16 is a lot.
It is. It was a lot.
And I think that I like the fact that it was 16 because
What,
I
this started
do.
back in March?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. Because I think it was originally, it was either that or it was February, because they had moved the whole start time of this thing a couple of times. It might have been April,
no,
actually. It was April. Pretty sure it was April. I know one of these guys in the chat will tell us. Come on, we got Ronaldo and Dwight here.
Yes.
I mean, they will. Speaking of which, Dwight did pop in. Not an answer to that question, because he's, when you're watching a live stream, you're on a delay. So another 30 seconds, though, he'll chime in the answer, I'm sure. He says, well, I was looking forward to the Kamino uprising. I guess they said not.
It was May the 4th. That's what I thought.
Oh, was it? Oh, you
Yep.
looked it up.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was supposed to be April. Well, first it was supposed to be
It was supposed to-
February.
Yeah.
Then they moved it to
That was
April.
original.
Yeah, then they moved it to April or to May. Yeah, and we're coming up on
August.
September, so
Yep.
yeah, that's actually been a long, long time. 16 episodes. But I think it's
16
good
weeks.
because, again, I think if they do the typical thing that they've been doing, like 10 or 12 episodes, it would have been too short. There's a lot to explore here. Yeah.
This is the perfect number.
Yeah. I think 16 episodes would be good. But I mean, let's do this, and certainly you guys watching this on the chat can let us know too. What do you want to see in season 2? I mean, you kind of told me a little bit, but like in totality.
Totality, I would like to see in season 2. I would like to see them with kind of hooking back. I said back up with Rex. I would like to see some more of the budding of the rebellion. I would like to see where the Empire is taking things now. Like, okay, what is this new facility they got? Lama Sayin, and what are their plans there? And then kind of like what are the next steps of the Empire? Because they're still trying to gain control of everything. And so is this, part of me wonders if this is going to run into Andor too.
Yeah, well, the two big questions that I have, is it going to run into Andor, or
because they're working on Andor now.
Well, it could also run into Obi-Wan too.
Well, yeah, it could run into both, honestly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think those, we're going to see maybe some connections to those, which is going to kind of tee us off to want to watch those two series, which we were going to do anyway. But for those casual fans,
Well, and I really hope, one of the things that I would love to see them do, and this is overall, this isn't just a season 2 comment. Overall, I would really like to see them do in a way what it seems like they're doing, and that is they're deepening the connections between all the movies and all the shows. So in other words, if we're right about this, and that is Waylon, and they start bringing that into canon, and now they're going to further this whole cloning facility and give us a little bit of a piece of what Palpatine's cloning program looked like during the original trilogy, then I think that what's going to happen is this could serve to foreshadow and also better explain things that are going to happen that we see in the sequel trilogy. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
See what I'm saying? Now, Ronaldo basically says, I look forward to seeing how they get involved with the rebellion and what role the Kaminoans play in the future. I agree. And that basically goes along with what you're saying, right? I mean, for season 2, you definitely want to see them become part of the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to echo that. I'm going to say for me, for season 2, and let me just get this out of the way. Even though Ronaldo did answer the question in the chat, Joanne says, is the Bad Batch a comic? Now, that would be really cool, actually, if they did that, because as everybody knows, one of the things that they like to do, whether it's a movie or a TV show, whether it's live action or animated, is they'll release a season, but then they'll also have a comic series that sometimes runs in conjunction with it.
Mm-hmm.
As Ronaldo answered in the chats, there is no Bad Batch comic yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it wouldn't be a bad idea, maybe not yet, but maybe after season 2, if they started releasing comics, because then you could do a lot. You can actually have a lot of little adventures, or you can answer a lot of questions. You could do things in the comics without necessarily having to weigh down the series itself. That's where I think comics and novels really shine, is they give you a chance to expound on something that's either in a film or in a TV show, but you don't necessarily have to weigh it down with all this exposition. Now, again, it's a bad move if you, say, explain Palpatine's return. That should be done in whatever film it was. See, I like the idea that they're actually starting to explain some of this in a lot of the expanded material. What I didn't like was the fact that they should have given you some sort of an explanation that they can then expand in a comic, in a novel, in another show. But they should have actually explained it in The Rise of Skywalker in some form. So with season 2, what I would like to see is the same thing. I would love to see them hooking up with the rebellion, because they're getting into that window. It's sort of like you pointed out. I mean, the further along we get into the Bad Batch, they have to start doing it. But I don't want them to do it in the way that we saw in Rogue One. What I would like to see happen is, and I think you kind of alluded to this actually, and that is you're replacing Sid with Rex.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what you're doing. They're still doing these little side mission type of things. They're not super official. They're not, okay, we're joining the cause and doing all this stuff. It's more like they contain, or they have a certain set of skills, and we can utilize that. And instead of you taking all these little missions for pay with Sid, now you take them for pay with us. And then maybe eventually they get fully adopted in.
Mm-hmm.
Because you do have to explain what happens to these guys by the time of the original trilogy. You can't. They're a little bit too.
Yeah.
You
prominent.
know. Yeah, they're too prominent. You're either going to have to do a Rogue One on these guys and just wipe them out before 4 hits, or you have to do something else. Because to be honest, it's a little weird that we didn't even see him during Rebels. I mean, I know why.
True.
It's because it was written beforehand, but at the same time...
Yeah, the in-universe answer, though.
Yeah, the in-universe answer, there is no way that with a lot of the missions, especially once the Ghost Crew started doing more rebellion-type stuff, there's no way in the world that they would have not run into this Clone Force 99 group, you know?
Right.
So you're going to have to explain it. But the question is, ultimately, what did you guys think of this whole thing? Did you guys think that the season finale of The Bad Batch was a satisfying one? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that I'm sure do actually feel that way. Just none of us. Or do you feel like us and some of the people that you saw chatting today, where it wasn't a bad episode, it was good, but probably wasn't the best season finale episode? Let us know in the comments below. While you're doing that, don't forget to hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, because look, we go live every Monday and every Friday night at 8 o'clock. Now with the Bad Batch over, Monday nights are kind of free. You know, maybe now we can get to the High Republic. But if not, you know what we're going to be doing, guys? We're going to be doing our top 10 this or our top 5 that. You know, usually we try to do some more fun type discussion-based shows on Mondays. And then on Fridays, whatever's really happening in the world of Star Wars, we talk about it. Because we're not so much of a news show. We're more of like a reactionary. We're like you guys. We're fans. We love to just talk about this stuff and, you know, and do that. So make sure you guys join us. And join us this Friday because we're going to be talking about a bunch of the really cool stuff. We haven't really decided yet which one we're going to, because there's so much stuff that's popped off in the last couple of days, quite honestly. So,
but one of the things that we probably will talk about is there's some certain cast members or some people who they may be cast to play certain roles.
Yes.
We'll just leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. So I was trying to find a way not to really say we don't want to give it away. Right. You guys got to watch Friday. You got to like check it out and then you'll find out. I'm not going to give it away now.
All right.
So, I mean, with that, we hope to see you guys Friday night at 8 o'clock. Until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.